Welcome to this week's episode of Jonathan on Money. This is episode number 123. One quick thought I want to share with you before we start today. So, there's this podcast I often listen to with Tim Ferriss, and for those who are not familiar, Ferriss is an author, entrepreneur, podcaster, and he's best known for his bestsellers. One was The 4 Hour Work Week, and I think he had four other books that were on the New York Times bestseller list. He's also an angel investor in startups like Uber and Shopify. And as I mentioned, he's the host of the Tim Ferriss Show, where he interviews top performers on productivity, wellness, and personal growth. One question he asks all his guests is, what is the most impactful purchase for $100 or less that they made recently? And I was thinking about this question myself. I'm not sure if this would be my definitive answer, but one relatively cheap purchase we made several years ago was a collapsible cooler. Since we usually fly to one destination and then road trip to another destination before we fly home, we can't actually take a normal cooler with us. So the collapsible one is becoming handy. And we use it on all our road trips. So you take it, you fill it up with ice, or more accurately, I put ice in a Ziploc freezer bag and then put it in so you can have cold drinks all trip long. At the end of the trip, I dry out the cooler, throw it into my check-in luggage, and take it home. Easy schmeezy peasy. And it's the small things, like an inexpensive but extremely practical purchase that sparks true joy in your life. Typically, it's the little things that offer the best return on investment. And that's just something to keep in mind and that I had in mind this week as I get ready for my road trip this week. Anyway, as I've been saying the past few episodes, my upcoming fall live webinar will start on September 4th at 8:30 a.m. And my first webinar of the series is on tax issues with distressed real estate, and it's featuring Matthew Rappaport of Falcon Rappaport and Berkman, based on Long Island, New York. It's going to be an extremely timely topic given where we are in the economic cycle, and I'll be sure to include the registration information in the show notes to this episode. Okay, now for today's agenda. My talking points this week will discuss the account hierarchy. Our quote this week is from an anonymous source on what it takes to be ready. I'll spend the last half of the episode answering listener questions, including more Kiddush Club investment advice. And finally, we'll end with an actual idea to implement to your investing life, where we're going to discuss what it really means to leave a legacy. And with that, let's jump into this week's talking points. So, one of the questions I receive most frequently from new clients, understandably so, is what types of accounts they should open to achieve their goals. After all, there are a myriad of accounts to choose from, each with different purposes and features. Utilizing the right types of accounts to hold your cash and investments may have a variety of benefits, including minimizing taxes, easing administrative issues, and growing funds more effectively. This is why understanding the plethora of options available to you is imperative for your financial planning. I'm going to take some time this episode and in the next episode to outline different types of accounts plus factors Orthodox Jewish families should consider before opening them. The lifestyle from families differs from folks in other demographics, and therefore the types of accounts from families prioritized may be different than what is typically recommended. And hopefully my two-part overview on types of accounts is a good starting point, but it's also not an exhaustive list, so please speak to your financial advisor, estate planning attorney, and accountant to get their insights on what approach makes sense for your family. Let's first start with the most obvious place to start, which is a checking account. A checking account is a fundamental financial tool for managing everyday expenses and easily accessing your money. The salary for each breadwinner in your household should go into this account where the funds can be used to pay your bills. It is recommended to have 3 to 6 months worth of expense money sitting in your checking account. For folks that are retired, a year or more's worth of money of cash sitting in this account is prudent. Every family needs a checking account, and opening one at a large reputable institution is advisable. Stick to the funding guidelines without going overboard. After all, having too much cash sitting in a checking account is typically a poor decision as you're losing buying power due to inflation. Next account I want to discuss is a savings account. A savings account is a type of bank account designed for individuals to store their money and earn interest on their deposits. The percentage of interest earned within a savings account is typically higher than a checking account. I do not advocate for most families to have a savings account. I'll repeat, I do not advocate for most families to have a savings account. Funds needed for expenses should be held in a checking account where they're easily accessible and liquid. Funds being saved for your financial future should be put into a retirement account. Money that you plan to use for more near-term goals but not daily expenses should be in a brokerage account and invested according to your goals. Too often, folks will tell me that they have accumulated a large pool of cash sitting in their savings account, which is earning schwach returns and losing buying power due to inflation. There are more constructive ways to save and put this money to work outside of a savings account, which brings me to a brokerage account. A brokerage account or a taxable investment account allows for buying and selling various investments, including stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and exchange traded funds. Alternative investments can also be held in these accounts if desired. A brokerage account can be opened through your financial advisor or at the many large online platforms like Schwab and Fidelity, just as examples. There are no inherent tax benefits to utilizing a brokerage account, but they can be useful to save money for a variety of different goals. For example, if you want to do a renovation on your house in a few years, you can use the brokerage account to invest in money market mutual funds, which offer high yields on your cash than a checking and savings account. If you have a longer term goal, like saving for Maishi's bar mitzvah in 7 years, you may want to consider investing in stock and bond mutual funds to possibly experience more growth with these funds. Money in brokerage accounts can also be used for longer term goals, like buying a condo in Miami in 15 years, paying for a chasana in 18 years, or to supplement your retirement savings. There are many different sensible ways to utilize a brokerage account or a taxable account to save for your varied goals. Next, and this is super important, there are retirement accounts. It is imperative for every family to save for retirement. At some point down the road, everybody wants the option to either retire or cut back from working. Many people may no longer be able to work as they get older due to health concerns. Therefore, saving and investing funds to be able to retire in the future is essential. Thankfully, there are many ways to save for retirement. The options you choose from may depend on your employment situation and tax status. I'm going to highlight just a few options. First, an IRA. An IRA is an individual retirement account, and it's tax advantage investment account designed to help people save for retirement. Anyone can open this account as long as you or your spouse has earned income. You could deposit up to $7,000 annually if you're under 50 or $8,000 if you're over 50 and have at least that amount of income. And by the way, these are 2025 numbers, so they can change every year. Utilizing a traditional IRA will come with tax deferred growth and potentially a tax deduction, while utilizing a Roth IRA will allow for tax-free growth, tax-free withdrawals of the funds in retirement. There are restrictions based on your level of income and marital status that should be considered before depositing funds in these accounts. Deposits in these accounts can be invested in stocks, bonds, or funds based on their time horizon. Next are corporate retirement accounts. Corporate retirement accounts come in many shapes and sizes, including 401k, 403b, 457. There are many different types of 457, and also SEP IRA. An entire series of podcasts can be recorded on these accounts and their various nuances without even scratching the surface. The important thing for listeners to understand is that these retirement vehicles make it seamless for employees to save for retirement since the funds typically come right out of their checking account and are invested automatically. Oftentimes, your employer may contribute to your account through a company match. And it's worth speaking to your human resources department or CFO to review your options. I strongly encourage my clients to make the most of these accounts, which means maxing out the full contribution limit, which is $23,500 in 2025 for a 401k if you're under 50 years old, and your employer may contribute a match on top of that. A company retirement plan typically has a list of options in which you can invest. The key is picking investments that are suitable for your time horizon and financial goals. In my talking points next week, I'm going to cover additional accounts that many firm families should consider for their children, different types of trust accounts, and charitable giving as well. Okay, that's it for my talking points this week. And as a reminder, you can be notified of all my recent articles, webinars, and all the work I put out by subscribing to my free monthly newsletter at parkbridgewealth.com/newsletter. This week's quote is an anonymous quote I saw online and I absolutely loved it. So I'd like to share it with you. And the quote is this: being ready is a myth. You start, you suck, you figure it out, you get better. I'm a big fan of preparation. That's literally what I help people do for a living. I help them plan for their financial future. However, some people get stuck in preparation mode and have a hard time progressing because they're so worried of not being sufficiently prepared. The reality is, it's impossible to plan for every scenario. Whether you're starting your own business, taking on a larger role at work, organizing or facilitating an event or a program, getting married, having kids, it's full of tons of unknowns. To use a slogan from Nike, just do it. You will inevitably end up making mistakes and will need to course correct along the way. You'll suck, but you'll get better over time. This is true with investing too. Many people are worried about waiting for the right set of circumstances before putting money to work. They like to prepare endlessly. This is the wrong approach. Invest and then course correct as your life or financial life changes. The important thing is to get started. It's important in short, don't get stuck in the preparation stage at the expense of making progress in your life. You'll learn as you go. That's what everyone does. No one actually has it all together when they first get started. Okay, now let's jump into this week's financial questions. And if you do have a question, feel free to submit it to me, and it may be answered in a future episode. Okay, first question. I noticed that it was your 40th birthday this year. Happy birthday. In retrospect, is there anything you would do differently to put you on better financial footing? First of all, thank you for the warm birthday wishes. No, I don't believe that I would do anything different. I also don't believe in beating yourself up about better decisions you could have made with the benefit of hindsight because that's not practical. I've always acted prudently and followed my own advice, which I have also given to clients and has served me well. I started saving early, I saved often, I invested pretty aggressively without taking excessive risk, I stayed diversified, I never chased the latest hot investment or exciting idea. This has allowed me to avoid the big mistakes that many investors and some of my peers have made. Given those thoughts, if I wanted a higher net worth, I could have taken more risk, saved more money, and worked longer hours. If I did those things, my net worth, I should say, probably would have been meaningfully higher. The question is, would I want to do that? The answer is certainly no. I'm fine taking calculated risk, but if I push myself way out of my risk comfort zone, I would lose sleep over my investments, and that's not a situation I want to be in. I could have saved more money, but it would have been at the expense of doing other things that I enjoy. I also could have worked longer hours and taken on more annoying clients, but I'd rather spend my free time doing other things that are more enjoyable. The importance of appreciating trade offs in personal finance is essential, and I believe I've made good decisions along the way. Obviously, with the benefit of hindsight, I could have made some adjustments, but we don't live life looking in the rear view mirror. That being said, I wouldn't change a thing. Okay, next question. I was speaking to a few friends. Here we go. Here we go. A neurosurgeon, oh, you know it's going to get bad. A private equity investor, getting worse, and corporate attorney at a major law firm. And I personally do quite well for myself. We chatted at a Kiddush this past Shabbos, and all of them agreed that private credit is the best investment for wealthy families. Given their sophistication and experience, I see no reason why they're wrong. What do you think? What do I think? I think you attended amateur hour and are mistaking that type of cheap entertainment for intelligent investment advice. Remember, schmoozing over a l'chaim or three is fertile ground for jokers with no investment expertise or experience, like the people you were networking with or schmoozing with, to show their true colors. Furthermore, some of the most sophisticated people are the worst investors and least knowledgeable about financial planning. They overcomplicate things and tend to focus on things that aren't important or are dangerous. Success in one area of life does not necessarily transfer to other areas. For those who don't know, private credit is just a fancy way of saying that you're lending money to institutions, or in more Hamish circles, to individuals from shul, who can't obtain traditional financing through a bank. This means there are big credit risk. In English, this means there's a high probability that they won't pay you back. It sounds better and less risky to say private credit, as you now see. This is why the targeted returns are so high, because you're taking a lot of risk. Remember, risk and return are inextricably linked. For some reason, many high income individuals think they have found the silver bullet investment of high returns and no risk. This doesn't exist. If you want to make risky investments, then it should only be a small portion of your portfolio. If you're going to ignore this advice and listen to clowns at the Kiddush, then you deserve the inevitable and unfortunate consequences of your actions. I've heard you say that a home is a bad investment, but a friend said you need to live somewhere, so isn't it actually a really good investment when you take that into account? No, it's not. That rationale is illogical and does not increase your return. There are many pithy lines that are thrown regarding home ownership that sound good, are easy to remember, but don't actually make sense if you take the time to think about them. This includes paying rent. Paying rent. This includes. Let me state them for you. Paying rent is throwing your money in the garbage. Nope, you're paying rent to not have to deal with unplanned expenses and headaches of home ownership. And why would you pay your landlord's mortgage? You're paying him or her a fee just like any other service provider. This is not a bad thing. And if he chooses to use your fee to pay his own mortgage, then why is that a bad thing? And why does that impact you? Mathematically, if you're paying rent within your means and then invest in the market, you will likely have a greater net worth than being stuck in an investment that will barely keep up with inflation, which is your home. All that being said, I do think owning a home is a sensible financial decision for many young families, even though it is not a good investment decision. Why? I've addressed this in previous episodes, but I imagine it will come up again in the future because it is a popular topic. Next question. Is owning multiple homes greedy? The word greedy implies selfishness. If you make enough money to afford multiple homes and are giving to charity every year, why would it be greedy? You should be able to spend your money in any way you want. Just because someone may not think that owning multiple homes is a good usage of funds does not mean that everyone else has the same worldview. One could even argue that owning multiple homes is the opposite of greedy since you're paying more taxes, which theoretically should benefit society at large. You're also paying more people to help upkeep your various homes. Gardener, landscaper, probably the same thing, painter, construction. Seems like a great way to benefit the world. A separate question is if it makes sense from a lifestyle perspective, but that's a different question altogether. So enjoy your multiple homes and don't second guess your decision based on others' jealousy or worldviews. Okay, final question this week is I want to save for my retirement. How do I save the most money in my retirement accounts and give nothing to my employees in terms of a match? So you must be a business owner. So corporate retirement plans are an extremely nuanced and complicated area once you employ multiple people. A good rule of thumb is if you want to save a lot of money, you will also need to give more money to your employees for that privilege. This is so you don't violate the discrimination testing rules. If you really don't want to give more money to your employees, you are either limited to putting a modest sum of money always into a tax advantage accounts, or you can just save it in taxable accounts, which has no limit on how much you could save, but there are also no tax benefits. Keep in mind with every decision in life, in personal finance, there are trade offs. It's not always a trade off between good and bad, they're just different options one can choose. You could choose to have a steak for dinner, but that means you will have to forego a Carvel milkshake for dessert. Neither option is a wrong one, they're just different. Make your decision based on what makes the most sense for you, your family, and the success of your business. Okay, that's it for financial questions this week. And by the way, if you have a more involved personal finance situation, feel free to reach out directly to me, and perhaps my team and I can help you. The best way to get a hold of me is via email at jonathan@parkbridgewealth.com. And finally, I'd like to end with a timely and actual idea that listeners can implement to their own financial lives. Today's timely idea is understanding what it means to leave a legacy. For families with generational levels of wealth, a common goal is to leave a legacy that will live on for many generations to come. In order to accomplish this goal, it requires more than just writing a big check. It requires defining your values, which which I've mentioned in previous episodes. Defining your values will help pinpoint causes that reflect those principles, while also having the enduring qualities that will be around for many years in the future. And I'm going to make this point by telling a story that happened to me, which I've written about before and also shared in podcast a couple years ago. So a while back, my wife had a business meeting in Newport, Rhode Island, and since the hotel and rental car were paid for by her company, I obviously decided to tag along. The hotel was near two tourist attractions I wanted to visit, the Breakers and the Turo Synagogue. So while my wife was in meetings all day, I took the opportunity to explore. For those who are not familiar, the Breakers is a Gilded Age mansion that was built in the late 1800s as a summer residence for Cornelius Vanderbilt II, a member of the wealthy Vanderbilt family. Anyway, this house was a 5 floor, 70 room monstrosity that has a gross area of something like 138,000 square feet. The edge of this estate is on cliffs overlooking Eastern Bay of the Atlantic Ocean. And when I was walking through this house, the word that often came to my mind was extravagance. Unfortunately, the Vanderbilt's family immense fortune was depleted within a few generations due to their excessive lifestyle and poor management of their funds. On the other hand, the Turo Synagogue, while still beautiful, is a much more modest structure. It was built in 1763 by wealthy Jewish businessmen who decided to donate money to establish a place for Jewish worship in the New World. It's the oldest surviving synagogue building in the United States and is still used today for Orthodox services with approximately 175 member families. The breakers represents what happens when you are engulfed by materialism, while the Torah synagogue represents what happens when timeless, virtuous values influence the way you use your money. The Vanderbilts spent their wealth on all the most lavish forms of luxury, but now their home is a relic of the past. It's nothing more than a 2 hour sightseeing tour on your way to your next destination. In contrast, the Truro Synagogue is still in use by more than in 200, still in use 260 years later. Jews are thriving professionally and religiously all across the United States today, thanks in no small part to this little synagogue in Newport, where the first seeds of Judaism in the U.S. were planted. As families take stock of their financial situation, especially as we approach the high holidays, it's important to assess your own values when it comes to leaving your legacy. Do you want to worship your money and possessions, or do you want your values to influence how you use your money? Keep in mind that establishing a lasting legacy is only possible if you embrace the latter. And with that, it's a wrap for this week's show. Any comments or questions, feel free to reach out directly to me via email. I love hearing from my listeners. And finally, the secret to financial success is no secret at all. It's to spend less than you make, invest the difference prudently, and ignore all the noise. See you next time on Jonathan on Money.